Welcome. Today we're going to talk about cladograms. I decided to devote a lesson just to this because the state has really had a push towards putting a lot of these cladograms on the end of course exam test. They are really important for understanding um, the evolutionary, the I guess theoretical and proposed evolutionary relationships between organisms. So they are useful things in and of themselves, but I will say that there is an excessive number of these questions on the end of course exam. So cladograms, first of all, we're studying phylogeny, which is the relationships among individuals or groups of organisms as told by evolutionary history. So basically, putting it in plain terms, we're going to look at how organisms are related to each other, where they kind of fit in their life history and ancestry, and which organisms are more closely and less closely related. And so with this, we get these phylogenetic trees, and these trees are basically what we call cladograms. Okay, so here's an example one, and we look at this, and essentially what this does is it takes and organizes these organisms. This is a group of chordates, and the first one here is a lancelet. Lancelets are, think of them as kind of really, really tiny fish without scales or fins, really. They're not that. They're different. They're their own little critters, but basically they have the minimal characteristics to become considered a um, kind of like a vertebrate, not even really a vertebrate. Like they belong to a group called chordata, which means they're a chordate. They have a spinal cord, um, a nerve cord, a dorsal nerve cord, and they have what's called a notochord, which we don't see in the other vertebrates. It gets replaced by the vertebral column. So this guy isn't even really truly a vertebrate because it doesn't have a backbone, but it's got a piece of cartilage there. So this guy just barely qualifies as the same phylum that we do. And this is what we call an outgroup. So having an actual bone or cartilage type column that wraps around that dorsal nerve cord is what we call a vertebral column. And so at this node right here, this is saying that all organisms that are descended from this node right there have the basics, basically a dorsal nerve cord. A nerve cord we typically call a spinal cord, although you kind of got to have a spine for it to really be a spinal cord. So it's a dorsal nerve cord. And all these organisms have it. And so that's at this node right here. At this node here, we have a common ancestor. And sometime between here and here, there were organisms that evolved vertebral columns, basically something to protect that nerve cord. And so at this node here, we say all organisms descended from this point forward, from this ancestor, would have had a vertebral column. Now, jawbones was the next innovation, right? It gives you the ability to bite down on things. Think how much of an advantage that is to have that. And so sometime between this point and this node and this node, jawbones evolved, and organisms had that. And so all organisms from this node or this common ancestor on had jawbones. And sure enough, fish, salamanders, turtles, wolves all have jawbones. And so on and so forth, right? Having four legs for movement was evolved some point between here and here. And so all the ancestors from this node or point, from this common ancestor on, had four legs. And technically we have four legs, just two of them have been adapted as arms. Amniotic eggs, and again, humans, wolves, all mammals have amniotic eggs. We just have them in what's called an amniotic sac, which is what holds the baby. We also have another adaptation called a placenta, which is an adaptation of the amniotic egg to basically live internally inside the uterus. So amniotic eggs, basically everything after this node here is what we call an amniote. And then the unique innovation here for mammals was hair, although technically it was mammary glands, but this is the cladogram we have, so it's what we're going with. Here's one where we see a cladogram of primate evolution, right? And so you look at this, and what you can do is you can say, all right, so what organism do you think do scientists consider most closely and least closely related to us? And so if you look at this and you kind of go back through where we have these nodes, you can look at the distance between two organisms and find their common node, and you can see how closely they are related. Since chimpanzees and humans have this node that's right there, that tells us that they're really closely related. Versus if we go with New World monkeys, so these are the monkeys that we see in the Americas, such as the squirrel monkey, the howler monkey, spider monkeys. They are New World monkeys, right? And they branched way back here. So who's more closely related? Are chimpanzees more closely related to humans or to New World monkeys? Well, the common node between a chimp and a New World monkey is way down here. And so this is one of those things that really annoys me, is that I hear people frequently refer to like chimps, gorillas, orangutans as monkeys, but they're not. They're primates because they have a grasping thumb, but they're not monkeys. Notice that the monkeys branch off much earlier, and we have two major different groups of monkeys. The monkeys that we see in the Asias and the countries of Asia, and Africa, and even parts of Europe, are what we call old world monkeys, also over into Indonesia and such. And so these guys branched off more recently than the New World monkeys. The New World monkeys are actually much different than all the other primates because they branched off so early. They look very similar to the Old World monkeys. So apes branched off later from the New World monkeys, and so these are actually all apes. Gibbons are what we call lesser apes, and then we have the greater apes, which are the orangutans, gorillas, chimps, and then we actually put humans into that category. And so another misconception that's really a problem that people misunderstand about evolution is, did humans evolve from chimpanzees? And if you look at this, no, they have a common ancestor, but you don't see chimps on this line. All right. There are traits that both humans and chimpanzees have in common, right? And those traits would be right here at this node. However, we evolved upright walking, larger brains, sexual dimorphism, a menstrual versus an estrous cycle. Those are all differences between us and chimpanzees. So the chimpanzees would have to be down here on this line, and actually they would have gone extinct if we had evolved from chimpanzees. We didn't evolve from chimpanzees. Furthermore, we didn't evolve from monkeys either. See, part of the problem is that people confuse chimps and monkeys. We didn't evolve from monkeys. Notice monkeys kind of went their own way. Yeah, we have some traits in common with monkeys. The fact that we have thumbs, but that's not like a trait that we're going to say, hey, that makes us really closely related, or that we evolved from those things. No, there was a common ancestor, some species of primate way back when that was a common ancestor, but is long gone, long extinct. Monkeys went on their own path of evolution. Humans went on a different path. And again, I realize that many people are kind of like take it or leave it in terms of evolution, and that's fine. But just understand what the theory is actually saying. That's what I really want to get across to you. Now, you will notice that sometimes you see the tree look like this, and sometimes you'll see the tree look like this. And there is absolutely no difference. As a matter of fact, you can swap A and B, and you still have the same tree because it's the nodes that are important. Notice here that we can actually rotate and swap A and B here as well. So the nodes here go in almost like a T shape, and so they kind of branch off. In other words, is A more closely related to B or to C? Well, if we look at this one, A and B have their node right here, which is much closer than the node between A and C. Here, A and B have their node here, which is closer again than the one between A and C. So it's just a different way of looking at the material, but it's really the same thing. Just a different way of drawing it slightly. Now, Who's B more closely related to? A or C? Well, again, B and A, we can rotate this, and B and A have their node right here. So these two are the most closely related, and C is what we call the outlier or out group. So here we have the lancelet, which is the out group. It is it's considered the basal organism. In other words, it has the basic characteristics that puts it in this group, but that's it. Like, it doesn't have any of the advanced traits. The advanced traits in this group are, like, for example, vertebral column. All of these guys have it. Hinged jaws. All of these ones have it, but not the lampreys. And so you can see how we narrow it down with some unique trait that defines each group. Now, again, you do have to be careful with when we look at traits that define a group, because remember, there's a such thing as convergent evolution. So you gotta sometimes usually look at a couple of traits. All right. So here we actually see a cladogram of how we got a lot of the species that we see here today. And notice that mammals have some ancestry of organisms that basically a lot of people call these guys dinosaurs, but these are not dinosaurs. Dinosaurs didn't come about until much later, and notice that the dinosaurs are actually in this branch that's connected with the birds, not even the crocodiles. All right, so dinosaurs are considered ancestors to birds, not relation to, but like basically ancestors. Now, some of them did split off, and notice their line does continue on over here a little bit. Here's just another way of looking at it. Okay, they kind of spin this around so that you can see who's more closely related to who. So it kind of goes in a circle, just kind of to save some space. But look at, you can see how there's like a unique trait that defines each group. A little bit more, another complex one. All right. So who's here we have these fish right here, a coelacanth. It's a type of fish. A shark is a type of fish. Over here we have shark. So the coelacanth, is he more closely related to a shark or a chicken? Well, over here we see a chicken, right? Over here we see the shark. So let's go down and find the node between the shark and the coelacanth. It's a species of fish. And notice the node is way down here. Okay, so here's the node between shark and coelacanth. Where's the node between the chicken and the coelacanth? Right there. So which of these is more recent? Node A or node B? Well, node B. So coelacanth, even though it's a fish, and shark are considered fish, they're a fish. Notice the coelacanth has more traits because it has more nodes in common with the chicken. So the coelacanth is more closely related to the chicken than it is to the shark because it shares more of these derived characteristics at the nodes. Actually, it just shares 2 extra nodes. Which group is more closely related to A? Group B or Group E? All right, so here we have Group B. All right, we go down, and here's the node that matches between A and B. And where's the node that matches between B? I'm sorry, look at the tree below. Which group is more closely related to A? Group B or Group E? So here is Group A. Here's Group B. There's the node that A and B share. So I'm just going to write this is the node for A, B. Okay? And where's the node for A and E? right here. So this is node what I would call A, E. So which of these is more recent? Well, the node that is AE is more recent. It's closer than the AB node. All right, so let's look at this one. Notice it's the same thing. All right, really, we just rotated this, so it's the same question. So find A and B. Here's your node AB. It's at the same spot. And notice that the node for AE, A and E, is also at the same spot. So this is AB, AE. So when you rotate these things, it's still the same cladogram. Bats, pigeons, and butterflies all have wings, so they must be more closely related to each other than bats to rats, pigeons to owls, or butterflies to beetles. Do you agree with this? And so this is something that goes back to Aristotle's method of classifying organisms. He based it on structures that they had, morphology. All these guys have wings. However, that's a result of convergent evolution. So again, you do have to be careful with this, and just remember, what traits are you looking at that is exclusive to the organisms? Is this tree correct? Does this tree have properly labeled related groups? These two groups are what are known as paraphyletic. Notice that their node is way back here versus these two groups right here have a node closer. And so actually you should have to switch, bring this big bracket of P down here to encompass these two should be P and this one should be E. And then this would be the outlier group. All right, so each letter on the cladogram points to a derived character. Match the letter to its characteristic. So, first one we have is wings. Where would you put wings on this? Would you go point A? Well, not all of these guys have wings. Point B? Well, not all of them have wings. C? Again, not all of them have wings. Where do we see all of them have wings? It looks to me like point F. 6 legs. Well, no legs, 8 legs, 6 legs, 6 legs, 6 legs. You might not know much about dragonflies or butterflies, but both of them do have 6 legs. So all of these guys have 6 legs. So where would 6 legs be? Can't be point A or B, so it's got to be point C. Segmented body. Where do we see body segments? Now, if you've ever looked at an earthworm closely, it's got a bunch of rings on it. So it does indeed have body segments. Notice the spider has 2 body segments. The ant has 3 body segments. All of these guys have body segments. So point A is where we would see body segments. Double set of wings. Well, we didn't see wings until point F. These guys have 1 set of wings. As a matter of fact, these are flies, and flies belong to a group known as Diptera. These guys have 4 wings. These guys have 4 wings. So I would say right here is our double sets of wings, so that's G. Jumping legs. Which of these dudes jump? Well, some spiders do jump, but that's not what it's talking about, right? Not all spiders jump. But all grasshoppers definitely jump, and it's only grasshoppers, so I would put that as E. Crushing mouth parts. Now that's a kind of rough one. Which of these guys has crushing mouth parts? Let's come back to that. Legs. Legs, 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 legs. As a matter of fact, all these guys we said had 6 legs. This guy has legs, but he's got 8 of them. So I would put legs at point B. Curly antenna. Well, that's pretty obvious from the butterfly, so that's got to be point H. All right, so I said let's come back to that crushing mouth parts, because you might not know which of these organisms crush things to eat them. And so we could just use process of elimination. A, B, C. Oh, we don't have a D. And that kind of makes sense because if you think about ants and the way they bite, they crush down on things. So that is letter D for the crushing mouth parts. Okay? So this is actually from, this exact diagram is from an end of course exam that we had a few years back. So this is the actual question that they had. So I'm just going to label these with letters so we can easily figure out where they go. So body had segments, and they're actually saying it's right here at this point right there. Okay? So everything up here has to have segments. 2 segments, 2 segments, 2 segments. This one does not have segments, so I'm thinking we're not going to use letter C. Okay? Antennae. So these ones up here are going to have antennae. And then, so that's actually the point is right there for the antennae, and the wings is supposed to be right there. I know the letters are kind of big there. So these 3 all have segments. Antennae, an antenna, no antenna, antennae. So since this one right here branches off before the antennae, I would say this is the one without antennae, which is letter B. Okay? Now, we use this one, right? So the antennae ones are A and D, and only one of those has wings, and this one has the wings characterized right there. So we got to put D right there with the letter, which one do we have left? A right there. And it spells bad. I think maybe they were trying to send us a subliminal message about end of course exam testing. It is bad. I find it kind of humorous. Anyways, now theoretically you could switch A and D around except for where they put wings. They put wings right here on this line telling you that that had to be D. So it had to be BAD. All right, another way of doing this, and this is another end of course exam question, all right? So this is, they're looking at the genes and the similarities, like which ones are most similar, all right? And species 1 was 100% similar to A, B, C, and D. And species 2 was 97% similar to A, 93% similar to B, 98% similar to D, and 97% similar to D. So here we have 3 is 99 with just a 98 being B. Number 4 is being 99 all the way across. And number 5 is 90% A, 87% B, 81% C, and 93% D. Okay, so how do we figure out which ones are most closely related? Okay, so, and what we got to do here is put the species right up here. All right, so here's species 1, and the genes A, B, C, and D are 100% similar. Okay, so those are all 100%. Now, species 2, notice it's very similar to this baseline genetic code. However, it's got a little bit of variation here. Although, is there one that's even more similar? Well, species 4 is. So I'm going to say that species 1 is going to go first, and species 4 is going to be second, because they're the ones that have the most similar genetics, right? Species 3 is really close. It's got a little bit more difference, but not that much more. Only 1% difference on one of its genes. So I'm going to rank that third. Okay. Now which one's next? So we've taken care of species 1 and 3 and 4. That leaves us with 2 and 5. Which of those is most similar to species 1? And I would say the next closest one is going to be species 2. So that's the fourth closest related one. And then 5 is just way out there, all right? Now, why did I rank these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? What this is telling me is that species 1 we have 4 genes, and all of them match exactly to the sample. So we know that basically species 1 is our base sample, okay? And then species 2 has some variations, all right, not closely related. Species 3 is very, very close. All right, 1% on all of them, except for one of them is 2%. Species 4 is definitely most closely related. So basically, 1 and 4 are most closely related. So how could we say that two of these are very closely related? And there's actually 2 ways of filling this out. So I know I rank these 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I go with species 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm just going to write an S1 here to say that species 1 and species 4, because that's the one I ranked second, most closely related, have the most genetic relationship, meaning that their common ancestor was right here. All right. Now, what's next on this list? What did I rank third? Species 3. So here we have species 3. Because it's the third most related, and notice, there you go. And so the idea here is that the node here branches off, and that these two are very closely related, and species 3 has the most differences. Now, what did we rank fourth? 1, 2, 3. We ranked species 2 fourth, so I'm going to put species 2 here because it has the next most differences. And the one that's really, really different from everyone else is species 5. Now, here's the terrible thing about this. You said that these two are genetically most similar. Well, maybe they were the last two to evolve, and so maybe these two belong way over here. Essentially, what you could do is completely reverse this whole order of sequences, and it actually still works on this cladogram. So we could have, instead of doing it this way, we could have had species 1 over here, then species 4, species 3 is still there, and then species 2 with species, that should be an S, species 2, and then over here would have been species 5. So we could have just swapped this whole thing around and it would have been just as correct, and they did accept either of those on the end of course exam. All right, so if you take a sequence of genes, one thing that they want you to do, and they've been doing this on the end of course exam lately, is to look at these species. So we have species D, E, and F, and these are the amino acid sequences. And so what they want you to do is figure out what are the differences here. And so actually what you have to do is you have to go through and compare how many differences are there between D and E and D and F. And so actually you'd have to go through and count all the differences. It's easiest, especially when you only have 3 of them, is if you just go off of this one and you go, all right, so right here we have a difference. Here we have a difference, and just mark it off. Here we have a difference. Here we have a difference. And right now, just by looking at this, so there's a difference here and here, but I'm seeing that there's the fewest differences between D and F right now. And so what these letters represent are the amino acids in a protein that these animals have in common. And so since I'm seeing the least number of differences between D and F, I could say, I didn't even look at the pictures, but over here now I see that we have 2 birds. Obviously they are going to be most closely related as compared to a mouse. And so that's kind of how you do these. And so if you were making a cladogram, basically you would have something like this, with over here being the mouse, and then over here being bird 1 and bird number 2. And so here we go. Here we have species E, or mouse, And then over here we're going to have species D and F. And again, you could put F, then D. It doesn't really matter. Another thing that they do is they look at the electrophoresis one. And so they've had drag and drops with this on the end of course exam. So here we have 3 deer species. Here's their common ancestor. So we're going to say we have 1, 2, 3, 4. See, I actually don't like this because the common ancestor really should be right on the line. But what we're going to say is that this is organism 1. They're telling us which one's the oldest one. All right, so which one has the most common here? So this one's only got 2 chunks that are the same. This one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are the same. So 2 that are the same, 5 that are the same. This one's got 1, 2, 3 that are the same. So the one that has 5 that are the same, I'm going to say is the next most closely related. And then, 5 that are the same. So this is species number 3. And then the organism that has the next most related is going to be species 4. And the one that has the fewest segments of DNA the same is now species number 2. And again, these numbers right here are just the number of differences I counted as I compared it to the common ancestor. And so this is the order that the species should go in. All right, so that's some example types of problems that you'll see on the end of course exam. Here's an example worksheet. And I just want to quickly just go over, like, here are some other types of questions that you might see. What trait separates lampreys from tuna on this cladogram? So we look at this cladogram. Here's the lamprey. Here's the tuna. So what trait occurs between lampreys and tuna that's different? Is it the vertebral column, the jaws, the walking legs, the amniotic egg, or the hair? Well, between the two, we have jaws, so I would write jaws as the trait that separates them. What separates a salamander from a turtle? So we look up here again. Here's a salamander. Here's a turtle. What evolved between the common ancestor that was here, between them and the turtle? Well, it was the amniotic egg. Which organism is most related to the leopard? Which one has the most recent common ancestor here? Well, the closest node to the leopard's right here, right where I have my cursor. And so that means the turtle is most closely related to the leopard. What 4 traits do these 2 organisms share? Well, what traits do they have in common before we get to the common ancestor? Well, vertebral column, jaws, 4 walking legs, and an amniotic egg. They don't share hair because only leopards have hair. It would be cool to have a hairy turtle, but they don't exist. Which organisms will have DNA most similar to the turtle? Well, the ones that are most closely related, which is the turtle and the leopard. Which organisms will DNA will differ the most from the leopard? Well, if we go down here, it's actually this lancelet. All right, and then this is just another set of questions that are similar. What separates amphibians from primates? So we go up here, here's amphibians, here's primates. Amphibians do not have an amniotic egg, primates do, because we have that trait between the two. What separates rabbits and primates from crocodiles on this cladogram? Here's the rabbits and the rodents, rabbits and primates, right? Here are the crocodiles. We have an amniotic egg before both of them. But what separates the two? Well, the rodents and rabbits have hair, whereas the crocodiles have eggs with shells. So, there's kind of 2 traits that are different. I think what they're going for there is the hair, because the hair separates these guys from the crocodiles. Which organism is most related to the bird on this cladogram? So you got to go and find where's their most recent node, right there. And then it's crocodiles. What 5 traits do they share? Well, again, here's the node, so it's everything that's leading up to that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's these 5 that these guys share in common. Which organism will have DNA most similar to the bird? Well, again, the most recent ancestors right there. And there you go. And which organisms will differ the most from the bird? Again, here's the sharks. It's the node that's farthest back. So if you go back to that question that was back here, and I looked at the percentages of similarities, and I gave you two different ways, and I said you could organize it either way. Really, I know that I said on the state test they accepted either answer, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like the two organisms that had the most similar DNA should be here, which was species 1 and species 4. So I would put those two there. Okay. And then the next most related one was here. So that would have been species 3. And then looking at this, species 2 was next most related, so I'd put that there. And species 5 was here, and that's your outgroup. And honestly, that seems to make the most sense. Remember, these end of course exams aren't necessarily written by people who have great expertise in the content, and so I just do want you guys to realize that you can see a variety of differences in quality of some of these problems. Okay? All right, and that's everything for today.